This is the Solid Signal podcast for the week of March 26, 2018. Had an interesting weekend because I love it when people use my own words against me. And someone on our blog said, hey, you always say, let's be future-proof. Let's try to make sure that everything is covered for the future. But yet, then you also say, if you walk into a new project and all the hardware is 3 or 4 years old, replace it. Even replace the cables. So which is it? Is it possible to be future-proof? Or is it simply impossible? The answer is kind of a sliding scale. It is possible to be future-proof for the next 3 to 5 years. If you're wiring a home right now for satellite, you should be putting a lot of coax in the wall, although I expect sometime within the next 3 to 5 years, the majority of satellite installs to use wireless hardware. And as a matter of fact, I expect that more and more you'll rely on that internet connection. That should come as no surprise to you. On the other hand, if you laid coax just 3 or 4 years ago, yes, you really should be looking at it very carefully. There are ways to make sure that your coax is completely taken care of, that it's not going to get beat up in the time that you are leaving it alone. And that involves making sure the equipment closet or wherever you're putting all of the stuff you're going to be leaving for a while is nice and airtight, that it has reasonable humidity control, that it's free from insects, and that also it's free from things like sunlight and excessive cold. These are the things that are going to beat up the rubber sheaths and the polyester dielectric that are used in the cable. Copper itself doesn't necessarily go bad. It does oxidize, which is a completely different thing. I mean, you've seen that. Of course, pennies turn green, the Statue of Liberty turned green. And once copper begins to oxidize inside your cables, those cables are more or less useless. So that's the whole goal, is to try to make sure that you're being kind to the cabling and the hardware that you put in and not subjecting it year after year to the kind of forces that are going to cause it to age prematurely. In other words, just the stuff that you would do anyway. As far as making sure your technology is future-proof, gosh, I will admit it's pretty darn hard. It was impossible to think just 3 years ago that most people would actually have wireless AC networking and that they would use it to stream 4K from Netflix and other providers. That seemed a long way off. And yet, it's increasingly common today to see something like that. On the other hand, a lot of stuff hasn't changed. You can be running 3-year-old hardware if you want to. I know people who are running 10 and 11-year-old DirecTV receivers and they're working just fine. If they're working fine for you, then they're probably still future-proof. Although I have to stick in a plug that if you're really looking at anything older than about 2010, you have to be thinking, because there is some question about what's going to happen next year when DirecTV turns off its satellite at the 119 location. It's expected that a lot, if not all, of the standard definition channels will go away at that point. So if you're using standard definition hardware, you need to be thinking hard about your plans for the future. We've reached a very mature phase in home theater and with computers in general. Yes, we do have wireless AC networking that we didn't have a couple of years ago, and we are looking forward to having 5G cellular, but a lot of the stuff that is currently in use is going to be good for the next 3 or so years. The big change that will come at some point will be with 5G networking, because using that inside your home is going to make a big difference. It's going to mean perhaps, potentially a lot less actual wiring inside your home and a lot more wirelessness. That's going to bring with it a whole bunch of problems that we haven't even thought of today. And that's why it will be impossible to be future-proof beyond 3 to 5 years using what we know today. On the other hand, give it your best shot. Don't overspend too much, but on the other hand, make sure that you can prepare as best that you can. See you all next week on the Solid Signal Podcast. That's it for me for this week.